You're listening to The Green Flag with your hosts, Lukas Wacker and Kyle Cushman.
Sin City awaits as the NASCAR Cup Series heads into their round of 8 with less than a month till the championship at Phoenix after a wild final lapse at the Roval. Before that, it was a snooze fest, but other than that, we've had quite a bit of news that's come down through the NASCAR news pipeline over the past week. Of course, we recorded last Tuesday, so there has been a bit of news that has broke since we last talked to you. But lots to get into in today's show. We've got potentially breaking news coming on Saturday here this weekend. We will talk about the Tyler Reddick situation. We'll talk about the SHR penalties as well, because they're losing money left, right, and center, it seems. NASCAR is putting the gauntlet down on that organization. And of course, we're going to talk about the Kaulig official 2023 lineup, and then we'll look ahead to the round of 8 and make our championship 4 picks, because our pre-playoff predictions are long gone. Those are not even into existence. Don't need to talk about those. And then we will, of course, finish off with our Vegas draft. But before we get into all of that, how are you doing today, Kyle?
Doing good. Yeah, it was a strange Sunday of racing, to say the least, when you look at how dull the first 98% of the Cup Series race was, and then how chaotic the last few minutes were. More than a few minutes, but last couple of laps at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, excited to be into the final stretch of the season, and more importantly than just like the final stretch of the season, but some really fun races coming up. When you look at how great the mile and a halves have been all season long, and you look at Vegas coming up, and then Homestead after that, one of the best tracks on the circuit. And then we'll see what happens at Martinsville. But whether the racing's good or not, we know that there's going to be some kind of chaos with the implications on the line heading into Phoenix. So, as you mentioned, like less than a month until the season's all wrapped up. It's crazy to think about. But it's that time of the year. It's crunch time for a lot of these teams, and I'm excited to get into the fallout of the round of 12 and look ahead to the round of 8 beginning this weekend in Sin City.
Yeah, let's do it, shall we? We'll start off today with probably the most prominent news that is going to be circulating here over the next 48 hours or so, and that revolves around 2311 Racing, Tyler Reddick, and Kurt Busch. Per Lee Spencer, Tyler Reddick's contract has been bought out by 2311 Racing from RCR so that he can go to that organization a year early. Going into the Roval this past weekend, we heard reports that Kurt Busch was expecting a medical update and that we would find out this week. Kurt Busch has scheduled a press conference on Saturday at Vegas, of course, his hometown track. And we await to see what that announcement could be. But all signs are pointing towards Tyler Reddick at least going to that organization for next season. It's just a matter of if they're going to add a third car for him, or if Kurt Busch's career in the Cup Series is complete and he is going to announce his retirement. We're not going to speculate necessarily on what he's going to do for the future, but it is worth noting that if it is the end of Kurt Busch, that is going to be a very somber day for a lot of NASCAR fans, because he has been definitely somebody that has stood the test of time, been through a lot of turmoil throughout his entire career. But I'll talk about Kurt in a second. But for Tyler Reddick, Kyle, we talked about Kyle Busch's announcement about a month or so ago going over to RCR, and they were very adamant. They were adding a third car, a third charter for Tyler Reddick to stay at that organization for another season. But it seems like those plans have been definitely wavered a little bit over the past 24 hours, according to this report. What do you make of the news? Because we were pretty confident that Tyler Reddick was going to be sticking around for another year, see what would happen with RCR, to kind of just have a third team there and make the best out of the situation. Obviously not ideal for him, but and then go to 2311 Racing in 2024. But 2311 seems to have had different plans, and on all likelihood that has something to do with the update from Kurt Busch's medical over this past week.
Yeah, it's a very strange situation when you look at how all of this process started, with how Tyler Reddick announced that he was leaving RCR, all those things, through to RCR doubling down on keeping him through the end of his contract, even though they were bringing in a different free agent, big name free agent, and didn't have another car set up for him, didn't announce a number, didn't announce a crew chief or anything like that. And so it's been a very weird situation. But I think not looking at any extenuating circumstances or anything, but Reddick going to 2311, just in a vacuum, looking at him going to that organization for next year, I think is the best thing for all parties involved. You don't have the awkward situation with RCR and Reddick sticking around and what it means for a third car, whether they have a charter, whether they don't, whether they're open, what they have for crew chief, all that kind of stuff. You don't need to worry about any of that. Reddick can go into the organization that he's going to spend foreseeable amount of his future with, can go in there right away, can start molding with that team, gelling with that team, can start pushing towards championship aspirations with that team, because we've seen glimpses of that potential this season. So just looking at it like that, I think it's the best situation for everybody involved. It's just the other steps of why now, why is this happening, all this kind of stuff. And I basically see three distinct scenarios that could play out here. The first is Tyler Reddick stepping into a third car at 2311. They're adding a new charter. They're continuing with expansion. They're getting their future number one driver a year early, and everything's going to be great. Rosie is going to be a 3-car organization. Everything's going to be great. The second, and probably the worst case scenario, is that Kurt Busch, when his press conference comes around, announces that he won't be returning to racing, that he'll be retiring, and that Tyler Reddick will be stepping into the, I would assume, 45 car.
Bubba's going back to that 23.
Yeah, basically effective immediately in terms of when his contract kicks in, which would begin next year. And the third, and kind of the situation that I either hope to see or expect to see, is kind of a combination of the first two scenarios, where Kurt Busch either isn't ready or doesn't expect to be ready for the beginning of next season. Tyler Reddick steps into the 45 full time, but 2311 also expects Kurt Busch to return to racing and has a third car either open with a charter, whatever it may be, ready for him into next season when he is able to return, or cleared to return, or ready to return, whatever verbiage you want to use. So I think that those are basically the three scenarios that I could see playing out. I hope it's the last one I hope it's the first one, first and foremost.
Yes.
But of the kind of more realistic scenarios and where kind of the tea leaves are heading, I really hope that we see Kurt Busch return to racing in some form, whether it's part-time, hopefully full-time. But I certainly hope that this move to buy out Tyler Reddick and stuff like that is more making the best out of an awkward situation and less of the necessary steps to replace an injured driver that's expected to retire.
Yeah, it doesn't look good with all things that we've been hearing, all things we can speculate about and put pieces of the puzzle together. The fact that the press conference has come down in his hometown track, you'd imagine that has a little bit of sentimental value to him, to, end it where it all kind of started. Well, not necessarily end it, because the way that it ended was probably one of the worst case scenarios for him. If it is that way, crashing in a qualifying lap at all tracks of Pocono, what a way to go out. Like, that is not what a former series champion deserves.
Anyone
by any means, anybody for sure. But Kurt Busch, who, has basically gone to every single team, I feel like, in the garage area over my time watching it. He's gone through so many different cars, numbers, crew chiefs, and organizations, and has done an excellent job at boosting them throughout his career. Obviously, he had his antics earlier on in his career. There's no doubt about that. But I think over the past, I'd say 6 years, for sure, he's definitely stepped up his game in terms of being a role model and a leader for a lot of teams, helping youth develop at an organization.
Become a fan favorite.
And people really admire this guy, or have grown to really enjoy watching him race, and can support him in a way where, they want to see Kurt Busch do well on the track. And I think that was pretty much evidenced by how well his win at Kansas was perceived earlier this year. It's just a complete shame if this is the end of Kurt Busch racing full time. I could see him maybe doing another one-off, in the future potentially, but for full time, competing for championships, competing for wins on a regular basis, I would hate to see it end like this for Kurt Busch. And obviously we hope that this is not the case. We hope that the press conference is announcing, I'm out for the year, obviously, but I'm coming back for next year in the car, and 2311 can announce either a third charter or maybe even that third option that you mentioned. I had not even considered that remote possibility of, Reddick coming over early, and then maybe they have him kind of step in once he feels ready. But, it is obviously very concerning that Kurt Busch is in that place where he if this is the end of his career, that a concussion sustained from this next gen car, which is the overwhelming topic of conversation right now, of how the safety of this car needs to be fixed. They had a meeting this past weekend at the Roval, probably the first time I've ever seen it as a fan. I'm sure most people, even much older than us, have seen a situation like this where they all gathered together and they all kind of put their brains together. And NASCAR was very vocal and very transparent with the drivers on what happened with the rear end crash studies that they had this past week. Seems like that's moving in a positive direction at least, but you can push for safety till the end of time. It can always be safer and always can be better. So I'm glad that they're taking those necessary steps, but I hate that Kurt Busch was the result of, having to put this in this situation where they needed to realize that the next gen car wasn't as safe as what they initially tested it to be. And that wasn't even that good either. We talked about that last year, where we were very concerned about this next gen car through the crash reports and through the testing. I mean, we think back to William Byron's crash at California Speedway last year, and there was not a very good report that came out of there. All the things that William Byron had said, or what was rumored by the media that came out, it was not a good look. And they still continued on with that car and that current configuration of the rear end that seemed to be the main problem. So, but let's bring it back to Tyler Reddick. This is a guy that is clearly destined for a long future in the sport, a competitive future in the sport. And I mean, I picked him as my champion this year in RCR equipment. And if he's going over to, let's say, a 2-car organization with him and Bubba Wallace for next season, there's going to be a lot of resources put into him. I think, more so than he's ever had in his entire career, because it is such, a very small team that Toyota has created over there. JGR and 2311 Racing, they have all their resources put into those 2 organizations. The expectations for him are going to be, I think, fairly high, considering that 2311 Racing has shown winning speed at times this season on certain tracks. Obviously, Toyota as a whole is a little bit down on the road courses, but saying that, we look at this past weekend, these can still do it when they need to. But Tyler Reddick is a premier talent. He didn't win 2 Xfinity Series championships against some of the best that are in the Cup Series right now for no reason. He was Homestead obviously had a lot to do with that, but he is a tremendously talented driver, and we've seen that throughout the ranks on his rise up to the Cup Series. So if 2311 Racing can get him a year earlier, like it seems like they're going to be, that is a huge coup, and they can start their process of becoming a perennial championship contender year in and year out, just that year earlier. And that can make a world of difference. You never know with a team that is very, very new in the Cup Series. So I'm excited for Tyler Reddick, hoping for the best for Kurt Busch here. And it's not what we expect it to be with a retirement announcement. But if it is, man, what a ride it's been watching Kurt Busch throughout my entire NASCAR fandom.
Yeah. And just on the championship contender aspect of it, I think that's exactly the defining factor of this, because Kurt Busch for the last handful of years has been a race win threat, but not a championship threat. Bubba Wallace has gone from a solid driver to a race win threat at certain track types. Yeah. Tyler Reddick is a championship contender, or is at least has the potential to be one. And there is a reason why you picked him as your champion. Other people have picked him as their champion this year. I had him in the championship 4. It's because he's a versatile driver who is getting the most out of his equipment this year, and had some bad luck that ended up costing him the opportunity to go deep. Because he would be right now in the playoffs
round of 8
and being a real good threat to make it through the championship 4, which is the exact reason why we had him as a threat to make it to the championship
2 points
4.
away from it looking like a genius move.
Exactly. And that's the difference maker for 2311 for me. It's taking the step from a race winning threat of an organization as the high end to a championship threat as the high end. And next year, I expect Tyler Reddick to at least contend for multiple race wins, if not get multiple race wins. Mm-hmm. A lot of that will come down to the Toyota program at certain track types, like we mentioned, the road courses and stuff like that. If they can improve, because Tyler Reddick has shown if you give him the equipment, he can go out and do it. So I'm fascinated to see how it goes next year, because I do think that long-term 2311 is the better bet for Tyler Reddick than RCR is. I'm excited to see what he can do in that organization next year. And I think he'll step in there, be a race win threat immediately, be a playoff threat immediately, and be somebody that can, like he was this year, be a dark horse to go all the way to a championship four and be a dark horse threat for the championship. So very excited to see him step into what we assume would be the 45 car next year and see what he can do at a team that is probably going to be him as the number one driver. Obviously, other people are going to be there having the longevity, but he's going to be the guy that's stepping in with the pedigree as with championships at lower levels with multiple race wins coming into this year. So very, very excited. If it is, of course, what happens, because it is still a report, but all indications suggest that he's going there for next year. That's going to be a ton of fun.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it saves a lot of headaches for RCR at the same time to not have to worry about that in the offseason, putting together a third team, getting a charter, and building an entire new team around a guy that is not going to be there in a year's time. And that's why they're putting Kyle Busch in the 8 car, because he's going to be there longer, and they're wanting to build that 8 car into something. And that's why Tyler Reddick was told that he's not going to be returning to that car with that team. They're going to build something else around him. But I honestly believe them. I thought it seemed like 2311 Racing. Why would you want to rush it? Like, there's no real reason to pay that kind of money right now when it is a very high money building, high price to pay for a guy like Tyler Reddick when you got him in a year's time. So there's no need to really worry about it. But obviously with Kurt Busch's health status up in the air, we assume that he would be back next year. And we don't want to jump to conclusions too much, but if he isn't back next year, that was really the determining factor or deciding factor in our conversation a couple of weeks ago, why we thought it would make sense for Reddick to just stick around. No reason for 2311 to pay that kind of money and bring him over a year early. But obviously this is advanced their timeline a little bit, considering Kurt Busch's medical update they probably got, and it wasn't too positive. So our RCR is probably making the right business decision here to take on whatever money 2311's given them, invest it back into their company, and try and make themselves a little bit better than trying and make something work with a third car for next year, when it likely wouldn't go beyond that in 2024, depending on what their prospects or what the driver market looks like around that time. But Reddick is going to be a fascinating storyline to watch, no matter what next year, no matter what the circumstances is, because he was a guy that could have been that dark horse championship contender. A lot of people thought it. We weren't out to toast. Don't believe me on that. We knew what we were talking about. We'll see if he wins at Homestead or Vegas or whatever in the next couple of weeks, and it really would have looked good. But if that is the end for Tyler Reddick at RCR, he's had a pretty good stint there, and 2311 Racing is getting quite the catch, as we've talked about already. So do you want to talk quickly about Kurt Busch, Kyle, just specifically on him? Maybe just like if he does come back for next year, for this is the end, either or, what would you kind of define his kind of career as to this point? Because it has been so difficult for different reasons, both on and off the track, but Kurt Busch has definitely been a guy that's caught the media's attention, the fans' attention, and the sports attention for over 2 decades now. He's the last driver that raced with that old era. He's the last driver on the grid that raced with Dale Earnhardt. That is unbelievable to think about, but that is the circumstances we're in. Yeah,
it's certainly fascinating to look at his career, how it's progressed, everything like that. But I'm not ready to do the postmortem stuff on his career yet, because I don't think it's done yet. I don't know if he'll be stepping back to part-time stuff. I don't know if he'll be announcing that he's done for the year, he's done for next year and planning a comeback, whatever it is. I'll wait for him to make his announcement on his future before kind of doing the career synopsis stuff, because it feels a bit unfair to him to kind of jump the gun on that kind of stuff. But he's a supreme driver that every organization he's gone to, he's improved their quality. He's gone out, won races, every organization you can think of, every manufacturer you can think of. He's done a little bit of everything over his career. So it's been great to see his late career resurgence where he went from riding with a couple of backmarker teams, finding his way back up the grid and becoming a consistent playoff threat, race win threat, and having some really great moments the last few years. And I hope it's not the last of it that we'll see. And I also don't think it's the last of it. We'll see. I still expect that the announcement coming up, whenever it is this weekend, before the weekend, whenever it actually is, I expect that to be he's done for the season, and they'll assess basically in the off season. So we'll see how that goes, but that's basically where my thoughts are currently on Kurt Busch.
All righty. Just wanted to address that before we look ahead to next week when we can officially talk about what the press conference was and everything like that. But yeah, we'll see what happens with the whole Tyler Reddick and Kurt Busch and 2311 scenario as we head into this weekend at Las Vegas. But moving on to pretty big penalty news that has shocked the NASCAR world, specifically our SHR. They are losing money, and it started off with Kevin Harvick's team last week with a $100,000 fine. Rodney Childers was suspended for the next 4 races. He will return at Phoenix. They initially were going to appeal. They have now rescinded the appeal. And the team was also docked 100 points for modification of vendor supplied body part that affects the aerodynamic properties of the vehicle. So it was just the rear deck lid was the issue on the number 4 team. But then obviously the biggest one that we can talk about currently, one that kind of had an impact to an extent at the round of 8 finale at the Roval, was Cole Custer slowing down on the final lap and pulling a block for his teammate Chase Briscoe that allowed him to gain 2 spots, arguably 3, on the final lap. And that was the ultimate difference with Kyle Larson, the defending Cup Series champion, the guy that won 10 races last year, one of the most dominant seasons we have seen in recent memory, going out in the round of 8, and Chase Briscoe moving on to the round of 8 for the first time in his career. Custer was fined, or the team was fined $100,000, and Custer and the team was docked 50 points, and Custer was fined specifically $100,000. So that was a tough, $100,000 in total. That was just the fine, but tough situation for the sport, because we have seen this in the past with some shenanigans over the radio. Mike Shiplett was the real big kind of puppet master behind the scenes, if you will. He is indefinitely suspended as well because he came over the radio and basically told him that he had a flat tire when he had no idea if he had a flat tire. And that really did kind of affect the overall picture of that last half a lap there at the Roval. So Briscoe made it in by 2 points. He had the tiebreaker over Larson, so Larson needed to outscore him by 3. But there were 3 positions there that potentially could have gone the other way if Cole Custer didn't throw that block. So like I said, this is not something that's new to NASCAR. We have seen the Eric Jones and Denny Hamlin scenario, the Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson scenario last year. And we of course seen Spingate in 2013, where we added a new playoff guy in Jeff Gordon. And I'm sure that there are many other instances that we are not aware of, or, we could continue to talk about. But what do you make of this one, Kyle? This is not a good look by any means that the playoffs could have potentially been impacted. Of course, Briscoe did not get any penalization for that Custer maneuver because it did not affect his overall. It would not have changed anything, but I think it could be argued otherwise. What do you make of the whole situation?
You want my honest opinion?
This is what this podcast is for. You can rip into the playoff format if you feel like this is the place you want to do it. For this situation, I'm all ears.
I don't care. That's my opinion. When you have a format that's like this, you're inviting teams to do those kind of things. And there's a reason why we see team orders in other motorsports, particularly Formula One, because there's thousands and thousands and millions of dollars on the line, and manipulating the race to help your driver, your top driver, whatever, is what's most important. For NASCAR, that's frowned upon, but we also have a playoff format where each point matters that much in such a short amount of time, where you can easily manipulate stuff like that. So it's just a factor of the format that they have. And that's just kind of how it's going to go. We're going to have situations like this time and time again, where it is either too easy to do in a certain circumstance like that, where you've got a guy right before a chicane where you can give a little kind of nudge, your arm's itchy kind of thing. And all of a sudden you have a guy through the next round and have a shot at the playoff or at the championship instead of being out and battling for 5th through 16th instead of having a shot at the top 4. And that's the difference of millions of dollars for these guys. So
100%.
It's just how the format goes, and you got to accept it. And you got to penalize it when it comes around. But because they accept the format, I don't really care, because this is what's going to happen. So
I got no problem with what you said there. Really, I think that it's NASCAR's put themselves in a box with how they've been officiating for a long time, but specifically the past couple weeks. I mean, like, it is. I don't know how to defend it, like it's just been, some things make sense in the rule book. Then they got to change the rule book to make it fit their system, where they want it to be where they can make the calls a little bit easier on themselves. And it doesn't have to go to the appeals panel. I'm talking about Byron. I'm talking about it all. Like, it's been everywhere. It's been a nonstop conversation where the playoff should be, directly on the track, and everything has been taken almost behind closed doors, and it's happening during the week where we have to find stuff out. And I'm getting tired of it, really. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense for a sport that is, trying to gain fandom and trying to get back to its glory days and trying to build up, a younger audience and stuff, to make it as confusing as this, where that seems like it's okay. What Cole Custer kind of did. Well, it didn't cost him all the points, because Kyle Larson would still technically be out if the situation happened where, he'd only passed 2 cars instead of 3, but there was 3 cars in the frame where he could have passed. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And I hate that, that's the situation that we're in right now. And it sets up a really bad precedent for the remainder of this playoffs. I'm nervous for what's going to happen here, whether that's, wrecking somebody under caution. What's stopping somebody from doing that nowadays? Because it seems like it's going to go to an appeals panel and you could just get a 50-point fine, or you can get $100,000 or $100,000 get put against you. But now they changed that rule. So, it's either a points penalty or the fine. It's not and or. It's really just confusing, and it's just frustrating as well, because I tried to defend the playoff system as much as I can, because I do find it entertaining. I think it has a purpose. We've talked about this on this show before, where, I think I do not mind in the game 7 moment. It leads to drama. It leads to these kind of like what the Roval was this past weekend in those final 2 laps. But then there is a tipping point where it is pure stupidity, and it just isn't a good overall look. If you want to settle it on the track and, go man to man and just let the cars and the drivers do the talking, where it doesn't get impacted with, teammates and trying to stop up other opponents and whatever, then that's the way I want it to go. But if it's going to be the situation where all the organizations, I know a lot of dollars and a lot of money's put into this team, these cars, and for these organizations, a lot's invested into this. So it does really matter to them. But if we can't have stricter penalties where we can say that this is a definitive, like, no, you can't do this, no matter what the circumstances are. If it is 2 points, what if it's 5? Like we got to just draw our line in the sand and just say, you can't do that. Chase Briscoe, sorry, buddy, that's not allowed. Like, I'm sorry that you're on the bad receiving end of it, and you had nothing to do with that radio conversation, but you were unfairly allowed an advantage on that final lap that could have impacted the remainder of that lap. That Kyle Larson is now out of the playoffs. I mean, what is Kyle Larson thinking right now? I mean, he's still in the Owners' Championship, whereas where you're getting paid the money. But at the end of the day, like, you want the championship. That's the defending champion trying to, defend his crown. And he's not going to have a chance to do that because of team orders and, NASCAR not putting enough emphasis on what kind of an impact that can have on the overall scale of the sport. Because if you cannot have it where a guy just stops basically on the backstretch and just lets his teammate go by and has no repercussions, really. I mean, what's that going to do to the 41 car for points? I mean, it does nothing. They're terrible anyways. I mean, it doesn't do them any worse that they got a points penalty. They got a guy that could potentially go to the championship 4 who, let's not forget, won the spring race at this racetrack that is going to be the championship decider. This could have massive implications on it, but let's just let him off with $100,000 fine and 50 points, and we'll chalk it up. And Chase Briscoe, you can continue on. And this is not a target at Chase Briscoe. He did a pretty good job to be able to put himself in a situation to outpoint.
He sent it.
Kyle Larson in the round of 8. I mean, he was at a huge deficit on playoff points compared to the 5 car before the round started, right? He was a guy that was pre-race talking about the Byron appeal being or overturned. That had a huge implication on how he raced Talladega. Well, I mean, just imagine if he could have raced Talladega, we could have had a different points battle, but it's a trickle down effect. You can't just have it. It's one thing that leads to the other, and it's not looking good where it keeps on stacking up like this. And the playoffs doesn't make any sense from what it is initially intended to be. If it was what it was initially intended to be, it would make it a lot simpler. And I think a lot of fans could get behind it a little bit more. But in a season like this, where it's so unpredictable, where any guy can win on a given weekend. Christopher Bell won on a road course at the Roval, where the Toyotas have been trashed this year. Like, you can't predict that. Nobody saw that coming. We wrote him off last week. It's just all these different scenarios that there is enough drama already built up into the playoffs itself. We don't need these kind of team orders getting in the way of it and impacting it even more to a lesser degree and making the sport look like a gimmick. And the playoffs can be argued as a gimmick in itself, for sure. But
I've never done that before.
But when you put a gimmick on gimmick, that makes a gimmick squared, and that is not good. So
you're okay with a gimmick, but not gimmick squared. That's where you draw the line.
Yes. If you have a gimmick with a gimmick, we're crossing the line. That's another phrase. That gimmick squared is on the merch.
Oh man, the merch line is coming.
But that's my long-winded thing of I'm just so disappointed in the overall lack of penalty or lack of aggression by NASCAR putting their foot down here and saying you can't do this. I mean, 2013, you took out Martin Truex Jr. out of the chase. But you added Jeff Gordon because you felt bad for him, Wow,
I think it was a little bit less felt bad for him, more dollar bills, but
probably 100%. But they can spin it the way where Jeff Gordon was, impacted unfairly in that race, right? That's what the press conference was. It in 100%. So it's no secret that this has been going on for quite some time, and people will make the argument of the Elliott and Larson thing from last year at Bristol with Harvick, and then I don't know, was it last year with Hamlin and Eric Jones? No, the year before that, because Eric Jones was at Richard Petty last year. But the year before that, it's totally different because they didn't really allow the guy to pass, but Custer basically stopped. And that's, if you want to talk about safety, that is unsafe for the competitors. You can go down this whole rabbit hole on how you want to do it, right? There's a point to all of this where NASCAR needs to really look at themselves in the mirror here. Don't change the rule book midweek. Come in with a definitive rule book saying,
well, if you that was this, because Hendrick found a loophole in it and they were fixing the loophole.
Yeah. But if you come into the week knowing the rules and you cannot change it, let's just make it clear that if you try and do this, you are going to get a disqualification. The person that you try to help is going to get a points penalty in some regard.
Yeah.
And in this situation where it's a cutoff race, you are not advancing to the next round of the playoffs. I don't care how many points it was for. It is not right where you have the 100% rule and drivers have to give it 100% of all the time, every race, every lap, and you allow this to happen.
It's just too subjective.
It's too much. No. It's too much.
No, I get it. And I think that was really good. And if they make it so that it's clear cut, if you influence your driver or blah, 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 or whatever to do, if you say whatever to do X, the penalty is this, instead of having the 100% rule where you then go and have the wishy-washy, whatever it is, you avoid a lot of things, but then you also run into certain issues with the Bristol stuff we had last year, which a lot of people enjoyed, in the retribution on track and blah, blah, blah. So it's a slippery slope and it's no easy fix. And all that kind of stuff. It wasn't because it was Chase Elliott. It was because it was two drivers dealing with stuff on track and not a crew chief or whoever telling their driver to manipulate a race. That was the line that they drew here. And if that's the line they draw, fair enough, keep to it. It's the wishy-washy weird stuff where you're going between stuff. And yeah, it's just a slippery slope, all for a thing that in the end is kind of a manufactured form of entertainment. And this is what you get when you have those kind of things. And either you love it for the drama aspect if you're NASCAR, or you have to penalize it. And they chose to penalize it in this circumstance, which kind of goes against the whole format itself. But there's a lot to dive into. It's a convoluted,
messy. It's
just messy, and yeah. But that's NASCAR. So
yeah, I mean, the statements that they came out with after giving the penalty to Custer and saying, well, this time they said it over the radio. Oh, good Lord. If we're going down into the radio rabbit hole where it needs to be said over the radio, goodness gracious, we are in deep, deep trouble.
Basically the line that they drew was if the driver does it at their own volition, they're not going to do anything about it. If there's communication to do something over the radio, that's where they draw the line. We'll see if there's any circumstances where that actually comes to be, where they have to make that decision as to whether that's the line that they actually want to go with or whatever it is. But yeah, at least for now, that's the line that they've drawn. So we'll see how that plays out the next 3-4 weeks.
I don't know what to expect. It's going to be interesting. Moving on from that, just want to quickly mention Alex Bowman, of course, is going to be missing the next 3 races. He will likely miss the rest of the season. They're kind of keeping Phoenix open for his final race of the year, potentially, if he is able to return after suffering the concussion at Texas a couple of weeks ago. Noah Gragson will continue to fill in for that 48 car for the round of 8 races. So just wanted to mention that Bowman was still up in the air, and if he returns to his home race at Phoenix in less than a month's time. But we can talk about Kaulig officially now, Kyle.
Yeah.
Mentioned it last week. The reports all indicated Allmendinger was going to the Cup Series. We didn't know what the rest of the lineup was going to officially look like, but now we do. Kind of a weird situation on how they all announced it all, because Daniel Hemrick was announced 2 days later that he was going to be driving full-time for them and not in the Kaulig Racing press conference, but whatever. They've got 2 full-time Cup Series drivers for next year, and that is going to be AJ Allmendinger, and Justin Haley keeps that number 31 car for 2023. And I think that's ultimately the right decision. Justin Haley has been turning the corner. I feel like the last couple of weeks, he's got the 5th best average finish or something. I saw a tweet about it before we came on the show during the playoff races. He's been actually really, really solid.
Yeah. And I just have the stats here. He's 11th in points accumulated over the playoffs.
Not bad.
Not bad at all.
And then the Xfinity Series lineup, very similar. Landon Castle keeps the number 10 ride. We weren't sure about that.
No, part of it was the bad luck and stuff that he's had this year, but also the sponsorship and the weird crypto stuff. And hey, you know what? If he has a good seat, I don't really care where it comes from. So
that's true. I hope he has a bounce back year, because obviously
he's had some really good results, but some terrible, terrible luck. So he's a guy that's gone from driving his entire career trying to battle for top 15s just because of the equipment he's in, and is now having to recalibrate to how to drive for race wins. And we saw his potential to do that at New Hampshire. And then obviously because of the points penalty and stuff that he had because of the DQ there, they ended up missing the playoffs and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but
simple as that.
That's a team I'm really excited to watch next year, with a guy who has shown a lot of bright spots over his career, a year under his belt, returning to a team, something that he hasn't done too often in his career. I'm excited to see what he can do, and I'm glad he's getting that second chance next year.
Yeah, I agree. I like Landon Castle. Kind of reminds me of like David Reagan a bit. I don't know why, but kind of like that guy that kind of had, David Reagan's a bit different because he had Roush equipment for a long time, but just like near the end of his career, he had like the front row motorsport stuff. And I always thought he did a good job at excelling in that car when he had the opportunities to, and then kind of just fizzled out of the sport and never really could gain that, full-time premier ride again after Roush, but maybe that's just me. Daniel Hemrick is returning to the number 11 car next year. He's out of the playoffs. He got knocked out this past weekend at the Charlotte Roval, so he will not have a chance to defend his Xfinity Series championship. I'm not going to go on in Daniel Hemrick. Don't worry. He's had a bit of a rough year.
He's a solid Xfinity Series driver.
Solid Xfinity Series.
And he's returning to a solid Xfinity Series ride. That's basically what he is, and it's a perfect spot for him. So
yep. And the big one,
Yes.
Chandler Smith. Chandler Smith is going to replace AJ Allmendinger in the number 16 car at Kaulig Racing. Chevrolet snags another Toyota driver, and a pretty premier one at that. Chandler Smith is somebody that is definitely, I'd say, arguably the favorite for the Truck Series Championship this season. When you look at the points position he's going into Homestead in a couple of weeks,
at Phoenix,
and how good he's been at Phoenix.
Yeah.
You have to really, really like Chandler Smith going into these final 2 races of the Truck Series season. But more importantly, somebody that could make some pretty big noise next year in that Xfinity Series. It may take him a year to get settled in, because he hasn't had too many Xfinity Series starts in his career to this point. But for his limited experience, he's got a ton of talent, and he's really found his groove here this season specifically, but the tail end of last year as well. Got that victory at Bristol. Of course, John Hunter Nemechek kind of helped him with that win in that situation last year, but still started to find his footing at the end of last year, and then now is really taking that next step, showing that he is ready for the next level of the sport at the Xfinity Series. And this has got a great future potential for him, for being that kind of premier guy that could potentially lead that Kaulig Racing stable in the Cup Series level in maybe 2-3 years time max, depending on what happens with their driver situation at the Cup level. How long AJ wants to do it for, how long, or can Haley keep up this run of form, or does he kind of just stabilize out where it's kind of mediocre? But Chandler Smith has got a bright future in this sport, and he leaves Joe Gibbs Racing's kind of prospect pipeline, the Toyota pipeline, that he seemed kind of destined for going to the JGR stable next year in the Xfinity Series, because they have open spots there, of course, for 2023. But he is deciding to take things into his own hands and go over and jump shift to the Chevrolet camp for Kaulig. So what do you make of this move? This is kind of something that I think came together fairly recently over the past month or two. It feels like, seemed like Chandler Smith's seat in the Toyota prospect pipeline wasn't as set in stone as what we initially thought it was. And he's jumped shift to Chevrolet.
I love it. When you look at the opportunity at hand for Chandler Smith going to a team that, is very settled in the Xfinity Series, but also has a direct pipeline to the Cup Series and a good future in the Cup Series. When you look at the amount of money that the owner has there, this is a team with legitimate championship aspirations, and they're a little bit behind the 8-ball versus a Trackhouse and stuff like that, because they didn't buy Chip Ganassi Racing and basically inherit everything that they have. This is a team that's quickly on the rise in the Cup Series, and we can see that from the early season results for Justin Haley, like we were mentioning, versus recent results and the speed that we've seen from AJ Allmendinger at times and stuff like that. This is a team on the rise. And so going to an organization with a legitimate path straight to Cup, which we could see him in Cup in 2 to 3 years easily. I really like this move for all parties involved. It's a tough loss for Toyota. This is a guy that I still have as a top 5, if not top 3 prospect in NASCAR. This is a guy that it put up very, very good results in ARCA. Took a little bit of time to get kind of his feet under him in the Truck Series, but since he has,
but that's the Trucks, totally different. We've seen that with ARCA drivers, and then going to Xfinity Series starts, they do a really good transition there. And
particularly at KBM as well in recent years, where it's been a particularly tough one to adjust to for multiple drivers. And this year we've seen him flourish. He's been arguably the top driver in the series. He's, like we mentioned, arguably the favorite for the championship. And this is a guy that I can see stepping into that 16 car and immediately being not just a race win threat, because I think that's the expectation for him, but being a championship threat as well, because there's a lot of wins leaving the Xfinity Series next year. When you look at Gregson moving up, when you look at Gibbs almost certainly moving up, when you look at AJ moving on, there's a lot of wins.
3 right now.
There's a lot of wins moving on. And so I think Chandler Smith could absolutely step into that 16 and not necessarily replace AJ Allmendinger in terms of the consistent performance, everything like that. That would be very lofty expectations for him. But I absolutely see him stepping into that ride next year, being the number 1 guy at Kaulig and putting up some very eye-catching results next year. I really, really like this move.
Yeah, and they're going to get an entirely different driver to build around there in terms of driving style. Chandler Smith is excellent at short tracks. We've seen that throughout even his late model stuff when he does that on the side.
Yeah. Look at his ARCA results and everything like that. Yeah. That's his bread and butter.
Yeah, and then mile and a half stuff, he's getting there, and then road courses, we'll see what happens. I think that's going to be something that he really tries to focus on. I think in the Xfinity Series with such an emphasis in the schedule on the road courses.
It's a shame that Kaulig doesn't have any road course guys to help him out with that, though. That's a shame.
I was just about to say, they've got a really good guy that can lend a hand or two and maybe a foot or two to Chandler Smith.
Literally, but
well, no, I hope not either. But maybe in the sim. Chandler Smith is making a very bold call, but time will see if it's the right one. But at first glance, it seems pretty prosperous. There's a lot of potential here for Chandler Smith to really make his name in the sport. In a Joe Gibbs Racing lineup, when he looked at the future, I'm sure he saw that maybe there wasn't an opportunity there for him in the short term, at least for right now. Kaulig maybe has that opportunity, maybe even if they want to expand in the future to 3 cars or whatever.
Oh, I think that's the aspirations long term. I think that this is a team that wants to be a 4-car dominant organization in the future.
Yeah, and Chandler Smith is going to likely fill into one of those seats, and that was probably a huge selling point for him.
Guy they build around. If you look at Justin Haley being a solid driver, but not necessarily that high-end upside, Chandler Smith is a guy that brings that high-end upside. This is a huge get for Kaulig Racing to bring in like a legitimate top-end prospect, and I think this is a great move for Chandler Smith long-term when you look at the direct pipeline to a Cup Series seat and long-term potential aspirations there. And that's just looking at the Kaulig pipeline. That's not even considering if he has a very good season next year. There's a lot of Chevy teams in Cup. He can parlay that into another seat. You never know what can happen. If there's another seat that opens up at a bigger Chevy team or anything like that, he could pop over to that. So really like this move for Chandler Smith. Love this move for Kaulig. And it spices up the Xfinity Series next year because we're getting Chandler Smith in a competitive ride, plus all the stuff that's going to happen with the Toyota seats as well.
Yeah, and I think people will overlook this move, really. I don't think people are talking about it enough because I feel like the Truck Series is almost a forgotten kind of place right now because there hasn't been too much, talent that's come up through there. I feel like as much recently.
They're also racing so infrequently right now. Like it feels like it's really a month between every race. Like
that's the thing. It's not a smart, strong schedule. If you're trying to get people's eyeballs on that series or people that get to know those drivers and what the future of the sport may look like, they're not doing a good job with the schedule and how that all looks because they started their playoffs in mid-August and they're still continuing on in that just the second round of their playoffs because they have a shorter playoffs than basically anybody and they still have 2 races left. But you think that they would want to maybe race Martinsville, but nope. Why would we do that? Anyways, it's going to be a very fascinating story and start to watch because I really believe in the kid. I think he's going to be really, really good. And Kaulig got themselves a really nice prospect here that, like you mentioned, that they can build around for the future. So anything else you want to touch on? Allgaier's coming back to the 7 car. We all knew that was coming, but that was announced today as well. But anything else you want to add on the driver transfer stuff before we move on into looking ahead to the championship 4?
Yeah, nothing too much. Just that I think we're slowly starting to see the dominoes fall. And I'm just because of all the different factors of Kyle Busch moving teams and all the factors that's going to have at the Truck Series level and everything like that. I'm very, very excited to see how all these silly season moves play out for the lower series as well, because I think it's really going to shake things up and make for a fascinating 2023 season at the lower levels as well.
Yeah, I hope so.
It's shaping up that way.
Because, the Xfinity Series, it kind of goes in I feel like 3-year waves, like we had the Bell, Custer, Reddick era that kind of dominated. Then you had the Eric Jones, Daniel Suarez. Would have been another one there. Not Daniel Hemrick. Chris Buescher was kind of in there.
He was in the championship 4s and stuff like that. So.
He had that kind of 3, or maybe that was a shorter window, but then this past, 3 years, I'd say it's been Allmendinger. Gibbs has kind of fallen in there this year more so because he's full time, but then you got Gregson, got your Allgaier always there. It's just kind of, the next wave here that's going to be coming through the JGR stuff. And then obviously the main car at Kaulig, the 16 one, is going to be going into the hands of a young star in the making. So it's very fascinating to see what the Xfinity Series looks like in 2023, but it's time to tee up Round of 8, championship 4 picks. We got to do it. We got to do it.
Do we have to do it?
This is what not to predict. I don't think anybody saw Kyle Larson going out in that round. So that's really shaken up a lot of people's original picks, but not to say that those were even in existence anymore. But Larson being out of there, maybe makes it slightly easier to predict in a way. When you look at where Larson would have fit in if he was still advanced and Briscoe was out, you'd have a pretty premier top 8 there.
It's certainly, like Chase Briscoe isn't a guy that I can't see very many people picking for the championship 4 versus Larson, who I think most people would have picked. So that swing definitely limits the amount of drivers, I think is the way to say, that you might pick for the championship 4, but it is still very, very close. There's a lot of fascinating guys, and it's still eligible for the championship here.
One of them being a guy that pulled off a walk-off win last week.
Yeah, he did.
Christopher Bell, and my guy, Adam frickin' Stevens, pulling the 4-tire call. What a beauty that guy is. Such a great move. And of course, Ben Bayshore followed him because he's a little puppy dog. It goes to his owner.
Okay.
Sorry. But Adam Stevens with the call of the playoffs so far to get the 20 car. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. That's the call of the playoffs because
it is.
That 20 car has got a serious shot at the championship. Don't quote me on that. You can quote me on that. The 20 car is going to be someone to be reckoned with. I would say I will take the Bell advancement with a win over Larson because I think the 20 car had a better shot and has a better shot than the 5 car did at winning the championship.
That's a bit bold.
That is my call.
That's bold.
I don't think it's bold at all. From what we saw in that first round of the playoffs, I like the 20 car more than the 5 car this year. Larson won at the second race of the year and at a road course at Watkins Glen. Other than that, he had some bad luck, of course, with engine failures and stuff, but I like the 20 car speed a lot. So let that little prelude into our picks, but let's make our championship 4 picks because there are 5 drivers that are vying for their first championship 4 appearance, which means we will have one guy in there that is new in 2022. I've talked about that before, how much I like the new guy. So we'll see what happens with our picks. But Kyle, you can lead us off here. Who do you think is going to be in the championship for yourself?
I'll lead it off with the easy pick, and I'll say Chase Elliott gets it done.
I thought you were going to say Briscoe.
He's plus 31 to the cut line. So, and you look at how this round shapes up, and it's mile and a half, Martinsville. And it's mile and a halves have been still very strong for Hendrick Motorsports and for Chevrolet. And Martinsville has been Hendrick playing ground for a lot of Chase Elliott's tenure when you look at how good he's been there and how good a lot of their cars have been there. I just think this round shapes up too well, even if they have one race with an issue, that they're plus 31 to the cut line where 3 guys below them can win and he can still make it through because he's plus 20 above the next guy behind him. So I just think they've got too much of a buffer where they can have one race go pretty wrong and still make it through. So Chase Elliott, I think, does make it through to the championship 4 still.
Yeah, I can't be bold and say that he doesn't. Like
I really thought about it. I thought about it, but
because I really do think he does not win one of the next 3 races. I just don't see it.
I could see Martinsville, but
I think I like another guy or another 2 guys there a little bit more than Elliott. And when I look at who he's against and what their strengths are on those 2.5-mile tracks, which has not necessarily been the 9 car strength this season, I could see two different winners there and possibly then a third at Martinsville could leave Elliott in a precarious points position, let's say the least. We'll see what happens, but I will say Chase Elliott still advances to that championship 4. For my second pick for the championship 4, I am going to take Christopher Bell. I do think the 20 car makes it. I do like the first 2 tracks a lot for him. Vegas, he's been pretty darn good. Their 1.5-mile stuff has been really, really good. I just hope that we don't see the tire failures that we saw at Texas. Shouldn't be the case because we've gone to Vegas and we have notes on that track, and it is not as high of load as in the corners as what we saw at Texas with the cornering speeds. but we will see if it's, teams are going to go ultra aggressive with their tire pressures this weekend and try and get that strong start to the playoffs. I hope it doesn't cost anybody. But I do think Christopher Bell, this round lines up pretty well for him, considering just their overall speed. And Loudon, they won at, and it's not necessarily the short track, but it's not too different from, a Martinsville in terms of being good on the brakes and car rolling through the center of the corner. That's the main key around those tracks, and track position is going to be so important. Guess who's been really good at qualifying? The 20 car. So Christopher Bell is the second guy I have in my championship for.
I've got him through as well. When I look at Joe Gibbs Racing and more Toyota as a whole, they've been very fast on the mile and a half all season long. Obviously that shapes up very well for the first two races here. And they've been consistent all through the playoffs. Of course, we saw their spectacular first round, and we saw them come through in a clutch moment at the Roval as well. It gives me a lot of faith in the team as a whole. I like the high upside in Christopher Bell as a driver. He's been a little bit mistake prone. If they can fix that and make it through, like we've said time and time again, he's a legitimate threat for the championship. So I'm banking on the Toyota speed to really come through in the first two races and have them in a really strong spot going into that Martinsville race. But yeah, I really like the 20 car here as well, especially when you talk about Adam Stevens. He's been there, done that as well. So big fan of what they got going on with that 20 car. So
yeah, he has.
But here's where it starts to get interesting, because those two picks I really liked, and I don't know where I'm going from here.
Okay. So I have one guy I think I'm confident about.
We're flying by the seat of our pants from here. Let's see who is left. So I don't think he makes it. I like him.
Say who.
Okay, I've got three guys that I'm debating for these
two
final
spots.
two spots.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is a little bit tricky. The first guy I will put through is Denny Hamlin. I will say that Denny Hamlin goes through and makes the championship four. Quietly has put together a very strong, consistent playoffs. Where that was the criticism a lot in the regular season, where they were a team that would go out, win a race, points, and then terrible on points. And they've completely flipped that around in the playoffs to where they've been a consistent threat to the point where they're the second team on points throughout the playoffs. Really like their consistency. And again, Toyota at these next two tracks, I really like the JGR and Toyota as a whole speed at the mile and a halves that they've shown throughout the year. And I think Hamlin could convert that into a win at one of those two. And then if he doesn't, he's a threat, of course, at Martinsville. So I've got Hamlin going through. There's a lot of guys, like we mentioned, 5 guys going for their first championship appearance. Hamlin is one of those few guys that has that experience to at least get to the championship four. We've seen that team, of course, falter in that final race, but they've been able to get to that point pretty consistently, especially recently. So I'll say Hamlin gets it done once again here as kind of a veteran in a pretty young round of 8.
It's not a bad pick, but I'm not going with Hamlin.
Okay.
I don't think he makes it. I just don't think he does it. And the reason why is because he's going to get bumped out by a win.
Okay.
By this next guy, William Byron.
Okay.
Makes the championship four. This round could not line up better for the 24 car if he handpicked the races. Vegas, he ran 5th at in the spring. Last time we were at Homestead, he won the race. And he won a championship there in the Xfinity Series. And Martinsville, he won the race in the spring. So I really, really like the 24 car in this round. It all lines up. They've had a really strong playoffs. Obviously, the 25 points with Hamlin and him were the issue that just kind of held him back. But his other stuff in the playoffs so far has been fantastic on speed. So I love William Byron here. I think he makes it to his first ever championship four, and he's going to be somebody that I mentioned earlier this year on the show podcast that I did for school. He was my championship pick, and I don't know, man. I can see it happening. William Byron at -3 to the cutoff line to start the round of 8. is going to bump himself in with, I think, a victory in this round. So 24 car is my third selection. One pick left. Man, there are some good guys here. There are some good drivers. What are you thinking? We can both go. I mean, it doesn't really matter. What are you thinking? Yeah, okay.
I'll go first because you already mentioned my fourth pick. William Byron, I have making the championship four. And for a lot of the reasons you just mentioned, he's a race win threat at all three of the upcoming races. When you look at Hendrick's speed at mile and a halves and how good he's been specifically at these 2 mile and a halves, and then Martinsville being a place that not only did he just win this year, but has been a threat at this place in the past. So I just look at the way that the round shapes up again, like you mentioned. I think that he might have to win his way through because I think that there might be some other people that put themselves in a better points position, particularly his teammate Chase Elliott, who I don't necessarily see winning over these next three. I think it's going to be tough to overcome that points deficit. So I think there's going to be some guys that might have to win their way if it's maybe 1 or 2 winners and maybe 2 spots in on points, something like that. I would be surprised if we see 3 different winners all in the round of 8, just given the way that these playoffs have played out. And especially with a certain guy whose initials are TR at the second race of this round. But I think overall, just William Byron has that combination of race winning threat, all 3 tracks, and a decent points position where I could see him going through and making the championship 4. So narrowly, I will put him through as well.
I'm in a real pickle here because I don't like the 22 car speed.
I didn't think about them once.
But he's at a plus 11 points. And if he goes into Martinsville and he qualifies well, like he has been, could get a ton of stage points there and recover a bit from what he had lost. I think he's going to lose in the first 2 races of this round. That's the problem with the 22. Chastain, I think, will get payback at some point. I think Martinsville may be that time, but I don't think that he's going to be out of this either. I think he'll be right in that mix of guys that can make it on. And then Ryan Blaney. I don't know what to think about the 12 car because I think Martinsville, he could go out and win that race, could easily go and win that race and advance himself into that next round. But I don't love Homestead. And I think he's better at Vegas than what the numbers have shown, but he cannot quite find the luck that he needs to. And I don't know if their mile and a half speed is quite there where I think that he can recoup the points. So I will say that Joey Logano does advance to the championship 4 purely off of that points advantage that he has. He's been really, really good at just getting results in the playoffs and being mistake free when he doesn't have the fastest car. I think he'll be going into Martinsville at a deficit, but I think he'll be able to recover those points at Martinsville in large fashion in stage points and then try and get a good finish. And he's going to be one of the most aggressive drivers out there when it comes to getting points and putting his car in the right place. So that's my championship 4.
Wasn't expecting you to go Logano there. Not going to lie. He's a guy that
sickens me.
Kind of quietly sneaks around, but the concerning part for me is the lack of mile and a half speed. They've kind of been a team that
it is for me
hasn't
too.
really done much there all season long. They picked up a good top 10 at Texas, but that was more of an attrition thing. But we also might see an attrition thing over the next couple of weeks. But they're a team that has quietly just kind of been there all season long. They're still there. And because of that, the similar kind of thing that I talked about with Hamlin, where they're a veteran that's been there, done that in a pretty young, inexperienced group in the round of 8. Absolutely see them making it through. But I think that there's 7 legit guys that you can pick.
Briscoe.
But
imagine if Larson was in there, man. It would have been so good.
But like Briscoe, hey, maybe he could go out and do something. But I just haven't seen it from him, and it's just going to be too difficult to punch your way through. But I mean, hey,
he's going to need luck. Massive luck.
Never know.
The only reason I kind of went Logano maybe over Hamlin for sure is that Hamlin's 16 points behind him. That is, it's not an insignificant amount of points to start a round. So I got to think that I like the advantage going in, and Hamlin could absolutely win a race, but I'm going to go on the safe side and say that Logano
That's
just
part of the
can
reason why I
continue
picked,
to be consistent.
Yeah, that I think Hamlin has significantly more race winning potential than Logano does over these next 3 races. But we'll see how it plays out. That being said, I mean, if you look back to the beginning of the year, Logano won at the Coliseum, and there's some that you could extrapolate to Martinsville in certain circumstances.
I feel like those notes are almost obsolete now.
No. I don't disagree there. Just in terms of the smaller tracks have been their kind of bread and butter this year. When you look at Gateway, Darlington,
they finished second in the spring at Martinsville. That's why I think that they have a legit shot.
Martinsville. I think they're going to be in a situation where they need a huge points day going into Martinsville, and they might be able to get it. So absolutely, good shout.
Yeah. Alrighty, those are our picks. God, I hope I'm at least right on 2 of mine. Oh my goodness. I just want Byron and Bell in there so bad. Man. I want one of those 2 to win the title so bad. Oh God.
That'd be something.
It'd be so great if I was there to witness that. Oh my God, I want to see that so bad. I don't want Chase Elliott to win. It's
What's the worst case winner for you? Like, what would be the just like you got to be kidding me winner for you?
Hamlin.
Really? Okay, not even like the first time champion. I thought you were going to say Logano.
Those 2 are both bad. I don't like and Elliott. I don't care for any 3 of them.
You're just those a hater. You're just a hater.
Yeah. But I gotta hate somebody. You get on me for not hating enough.
I know.
So
you hate like 3 things, and you hate those things with a lot of passion.
Yeah, 100%. But that'll do it for our picks. Draft time. How the turntables, eh?
No kidding. Yeah, you picking up the dub last week.
Tell them the point situation, Kyle. Break it down. Yeah, what happened?
A lot happened at the end of the race. You won with a whopping 134 points to my 107. The field, of course, had 176, so not a particularly great showing overall. But hey, a win's a win. They don't ask how; they ask how many.
Yeah. I've been asking that a lot to you over these playoffs.
Kidding.
So
we don't need to talk about any of my points really, because all of it was just a gong show. Logano had some good stage points. That was about it in terms of the decent point stays.
I gotta say, I was real nervous going into the weekend when all 5 of your picks qualified in the top 10. And I was like, are you kidding me right now? Like,
I thought it was going to be
like all stayed up for stage points, but then Reddick and Allmendinger's strategy of stage points where they got like 2 and 1 and then got the track position paid off better. Like, it was really weird on why the playoff guys didn't think like that.
It also helps that your guys had steering and one of mine didn't. So
yes, that little thing there.
Right. Yeah. Anyways, great shout, Tyler Reddick, second overall for you, picking up 37 points. AJ Allmendinger, I passed on him because I was scared of the stage points. Well, showed me up, picking up 41 points the most of the day. And Chris Buescher having a quiet 31 points there at the end. A nice.
I was nervous about him.
10th overall pick there for you. Guys we missed out on, basically everybody. Christopher Bell picking up the win. Harvick having a good day with 35 points. Chase Briscoe, a guy I was scared of, going out and proving me wrong with 35 points.
We talked about it.
Kyle Busch picking up 34. Justin Haley having a really strong day with 32 points. So
one caveat, obviously, we made those picks before the Byron appeal, right? So
that's true.
I will say, like, we didn't get the full picture going into the weekend when we made those selections, but nonetheless, I am victorious, and I feel like every once every 3 weeks I'm getting a win here, so I'm not liking that pattern, but whatever.
There are worse things than winning cutoff races.
Did I win Bristol?
I don't know. I can't remember. I don't know. You won a cutoff race, so there's that.
I'll take it.
But the big question is, what are you taking? Are you taking the wrap or are you taking number 1?
It's a big question. It's matter of fact, it's a huge question.
It is. But I don't know what I prefer, honestly. So
I will.
Glad you have it this week.
I will continue with the 2-3 wraparound.
Screw you! Oh my god!
Yeah,
I don't want first overall.
I can't think of a driver that I want first overall and then let you have 2 good guys after that, because I think, yeah.
I don't like that.
Sorry, buddy. And this is not just me being lazy about not wanting to change the graphics. I literally do want the second and third. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay.
least we finally have notes on this race from the spring. I feel like we haven't had notes on a spring race in a long time.
Okay. I guess I'll do the basic thing, and I'll take Kyle Larson with the first overall
Oh
pick.
my God.
He has top tens at every mile and a half we've been to so far.
Is that the case? Really?
Unless my stats are wrong, they very well might be. But
That's impressive.
we also haven't gone to a lot of mile and a halves. It's kind of, especially when you look at how Atlanta's changed and stuff. It's changed the numbers and stuff. But top 10 at the first Vegas, top 10s at both Kansas's, top 10 at the Coke 600, and top 10 at Texas. So really solid overall for Kyle Larson. And look, he's out of the playoffs, but they're still in the owners championship and stuff like that. It's very weird how it's breaking down. But I'll take Larson because I think he's got the raw speed, the results at Vegas, and everything like that. A racer's race, whether they're for the championship or not, even though he still is for the championship in a weird way.
Yeah.
So I'll make him the first overall pick here.
See, I've sensed the trend from the playoffs so far. The opening race of the round have been, what shows. We've seen a lot of stuff happen in these first races of the rounds, and it's
Are you taking like Corey LaJoie right now? Like, what's happening?
Like, I'm scared to take some guys because I think it could happen again here, where it's the least intimidating track. Everybody's pointing to Martinsville to be chaotic, but what we saw in the spring and what we're hearing from the drivers from testing, it's going to be almost impossible to pass. So could lead to some, bumping and banging and stuff, but it seems like you need a lot to move these cars, to bump and run them nowadays. So I'm not expecting too much of a chaotic Martinsville.
Quit your stalling and make a pick.
All right.
My goodness, this guy.
All right.
Can't make a pick.
Take it easy. Take it easy. Take it easy. Well, I am going to start off with none other than the Las Vegas, Nevada native, Kyle Busch. I want him this weekend. I think this is where he gets his final win as a JGR driver. I think this is it. So it's all leading up to it. He got the spring race taken away from him due to that late caution. I see he gets redemption here this weekend and spoils the playoff party here at Vegas. So he leads it off with my lineup. Second pick, I am going to take the best crew chief in the garage's car, Christopher Bell. I cannot stress to you enough how much I wanted him this weekend. And that's what I said going.
I thought about taking him first overall just so you couldn't.
This is what you did at Texas too, and it came back to bite me in the butt for taking him. But man, I think that he's got a great shot, and he led laps in the spring. The 10th place finish will not tell the entire story, but he did qualify on pole in the spring race. He's just been so consistent in these playoffs, apart from the Texas race where he had the multiple flat tires like everybody did. But his mile and a half speed was no joke in that first round. I really liked his Kansas stuff. Fell short to Denny Hamlin and Bubba Wallace in that final run, but if he had track position, I think he could have won the race. So Bell just seems like he's peaking at the right time here, and I expect a lot from the 20 car this weekend.
Yeah, that's a really good pick. I was going to take him with the 4 or 5 if you didn't, but I also expected you to take him with the 2 or the 3. I really like you taking 2 Toyota cars. They've shown really good speed all season long at mile and a halves. So
yeah,
I
will match bread and butter
with at least one of those, and I'll take Denny Hamlin with the 4th pick here. Just
Vegas
really
is not his best track.
Speed. Yep, that's fair to say. But overall, when you look at mile and a half so far this season, the only time he didn't have a top 10 was at Vegas. So I'm hoping that is
mechanical failure too. Then
that is hoping for the latter results rather than the first one. But we'll see how it plays out. It's been up and down results for Hamlin at Vegas. Before the early 2022 result, he had 3 straight really strong points days at Vegas. So we'll see how it plays out here. But I just can't pass up on one of the few remaining Toyota playoff cars. Of course, the only other one to Christopher Bell. So I'll take Hamlin with the 4th pick here. And number 5 is where it gets really interesting. Because there's a couple guys that I think I might be able to get later, but I don't know for sure if I can get later. Because you scare me with some of your thought process. Yeah, I don't know. You've been taking guys I like recently, and I don't like that. So
I'll take
will
it as a
take,
compliment. I mean, yeah.
with the 5th pick here, I will take a guy that I think you would take if I left him on the board, and that's William Byron.
Oh no, you didn't.
With the 5th pick. I'm glad it's the other way this time because usually it's me having that reaction.
Oh,
Based off of that reaction, it makes me feel good about how I went.
I really wanted him so bad.
He's been very consistent over the playoffs, and has shown really solid speed at mile and a halves so far this season. Of course, a big point stay at Las Vegas earlier this year with 48 points there. Faltered at Kansas and then the Coke 600, but it then has picked up the pace again in the playoffs at Kansas and Texas. So partially a defense play because I think that it's a guy that you wanted to take, obviously, based off of that reaction.
No,
but also a guy that I think could have a really, really strong point stay the way things are trending for that team. So I will take William Byron with the 5th pick here.
I love him. I love him this weekend. I think he's going to be so good. Oh, gosh darn it. Gosh darn it.
And now I'm scared because there's 2 guys that I want, and I'm scared you're going to take them both.
I feel like there's like 4 guys here that I could realistically take. Okay, well, one is going to be. Could I get him later? Could I get him at the 10th overall
here
pick?
we go with the mind games. Yep.
Could I get him? Could I get him?
You probably could. You definitely could. Or maybe you don't. I don't know.
You know what? I'm not gonna do the thing where I want the guys that I want. I'm gonna take them. So I'm gonna start off going 3 JGR, Martin Truex Jr.
Hey,
I think he is going to be a guy that could play playoff spoiler. Because what we saw in the playoff opening round, where the 19 car has a bit more strengths to their schedule, they were darn fast, and they could have won 2 of those races very easily at Kansas and Darlington, but didn't quite get that deal done. Finished 8th in the spring. I think there'll be some. He's always seems to be right around at the front at Vegas too. So I think he could be a guy that leads laps, and yeah, I like the 19 car quite a bit. For my 4th selection, there is a guy that I want. I don't know if he'll slide. I don't know if he'll slide. I'm going to take Tyler Reddick here.
Woo! Okay.
Yeah.
Big swings.
Yeah. I'm going non-playoff for these 2. Finished 7th in the spring, and I think their mile and a half stuff has gotten better since then. So I don't necessarily know if this is the right track for Reddick, but the top got ripping pretty well in the spring race. So I imagine that's going to be the case again in the fall here. And Reddick does it like nobody else. And Vegas is aging, I think, fairly nicely too, to where the top line is going to become the more dominant line as the run goes on. As it's trended that way, I think the past like 2-3 years. So Reddick is going to be my 4th pick.
Couple of big swings there.
Did you like any of those 2? I didn't get the big reaction I was hoping for.
I didn't. I liked them. They were on my short list, but they weren't the top 2 guys that I had remaining on.
Oh no.
That makes sense. But hey, if they're your guys,
I think I left them on the board then. I was hoping that Reddick was one of them, but I know I left one of them here and you're gonna take him. I know.
So my number 8 pick, I will make Ross Chastain. I talked about it earlier on the program that I really like Trackhouse's speed on mile and a half. In particular, Ross Chastain. In fact, Ross Chastain this year has the most points accumulated on mile and a halves. It's a bit hit or miss to a certain extent with Ross Chastain on mile and a halves, just because
ran really well in the spring.
There's a lot of chaos involved. But
this is his mile and a half, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything involved there. I really like Trackhouse's speed. I like Chastain here. And if he's going to make a push for the championship it's got to begin right here with a big point stay or a win. So Chastain, a bit of a big swing there just because it could end up blowing up literally on the track and also in my face. And then the 9th pick.
Oh, Jesus Christ, the 9th
so,
pick.
I will say, I'll talk you through my thought process here. Originally, if you took some of the guys that I like really wanted, I was going to take a really big swing. I'm not going to now because there's a couple guys still available that I'm thinking through. But A little underdog guy I was thinking about taking if the draft played out a certain way
Eric
was
Jones.
Noah
No.
Gragson.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, that's a sprint car winner. Yeah.
because really good car, a team that has been fantastic on mile and a halves, and of course won the Vegas race earlier this year.
If you took Gregson,
That would have been
that
a
would
bold
have been
play. That would have been a bold
I
play.
think that would have been your boldest play yet.
But two guys still on the board I really like. One of those is Ryan Blaney. The other one is Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott, just Hendrick speed. It's tough to pass up on him this late as a value pick. Ryan Blaney to maybe diversify a little bit. I've got a lot of Chevys. I've got one Toyota. Diversify a little bit. They've been a little bit hit or miss on the mile and a halves this year, but back-to-back really strong showings at Kansas and Texas. So I think I am going to end up going the Ryan Blaney route. I'm going to pass on Chase Elliott, even as difficult as it is to do, just to get a different manufacturer in there, just given some of the tire concerns, everything like that. Trending upward on the mile and a half versus Chase Elliott, who has had some issues on the mile and a half this year. So I will round out my lineup with Ross Chastain and Ryan.
That was the guy I wanted. That was it.
Sorry.
Oh, God.
Take Noah Gragson then. You won't.
No, I don't know. I got to rethink. I was really hoping for him. I'm completely. Oh my God!
You could double down
Byron
on the.
And
you could
Blaney.
double down on the Toyota stuff and take Bubba Wallace, so you have either all Toyota guys currently or future.
I gotta crunch some numbers here.
Okay, crunch numbers time. So right now, the current lineups, I have Larson, Hamlin, Byron, Chastain, Blaney, and you have Busch, Bell, Truex, and Reddick. Where are you rounding out this lineup?
God damn it. The worst part is that I don't want to take Chase. I really don't. Like, I don't want him.
I mean, to be fair, you did take Chase as the 10th overall pick just because he was there one time and he crashed out in like the first 10 laps.
Fired. Yeah, I mean, he's wrecked in the opening race in both rounds so far, so I'm not picking him. Is it nuts to go Noah Gragson? I don't know.
I kind of talked you into it, didn't I?
I'm looking at the spring results and that 48 cars right there.
So I'll talk about the Gragson stuff while you think about some stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
I think he's a legit threat to at least have like a top 10 day, not necessarily to win just because of all the factors at play. But I think he could be a really strong points day. When you look at his Vegas results, he hasn't led a lot of laps in the Xfinity Series, but he's finished top 5 in almost every single of his 7 starts. The only time he didn't was a 6th place finish. A couple of 2nd place finishes in there, led some laps earlier this year at Vegas, and he's going into a car that has been one of the top 5 cars on mile and a half so far this season. So I do actually quite like Noah Gragson this weekend.
Have you talked me into it? I don't. It's like I want him or Harvick. Oh, God. You know what? I'm gonna take Gragson. I'm gonna take him.
I talked you into it. Let's go.
Because
I hope you win off of that, honestly.
Because if I win, it's gonna look so good. And if I lose, it's more your pick than mine.
Oh man, that is too funny.
Oh my God. I'm gonna take him. I'm taking Gragson around out my lineup. Wow. I can't believe I just did that. He wasn't even on my radar. Wow, that's a first. I don't. You
got to check the entry list again, like you did last week.
That is a first. I don't know if I've ever been swayed like that ever. Whoa!
Wow,
that was an adrenaline rush. I got to be completely honest.
Oh my gosh! Awesome.
All right, well
funny.
That concludes my lineup.
There you have it.
Yep, I've got Kyle Busch, Christopher Bell. Who else did I take? I'm so
Truex, Reddick, and Gragson.
Yeah, that's it.
And I took Larson, Hamlin, Byron, Chastain, and Blaney. So
I like your lineup. I really like your lineup.
Hey, you could have had the first overall pick. So
yeah, but I wanted those first two that I got, and then that 4-5 kind of sways me back. Yeah,
fun draft. Good show.
That's a good show. Great draft. Any final thoughts, Kyle, before we head into the round of 8 first race? I mean, it's going to be a pretty wild round.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Again, mile and a halves have been some of the best racing we've had so far this season. And shaping up to be another great race this weekend when you look at the playoff implications, the different teams at the front, and should be a good weekend of racing overall. So I'm really looking forward to this one.
Yeah, same here. Should be a lot of fun, and I hope we don't see any mechanical stuff that we've seen over the previous couple of mile and a half stuff. That would be nice to not have to deal with that. We go mano a mano, and the playoffs don't get somebody gets screwed over by something like that, and everybody else kind of benefits from it. So, want to see a head-to-head show, and I think it's going to be a great race. So, we'll see what happens at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. But that'll do it for this episode. Links to all of our social stuff are in the description. Thank you so much for all your support recently. We really, really appreciate it. Keep on liking, commenting, and subscribing, and we'll keep on engaging right back with you here and bringing you some great content here. And we'll be back next week. So for this episode, I've been Lukas Wacker. He's been Kyle Cushman. Signing off for now. We will tee up Homestead next week, baby. Cannot wait for that race. But enjoy the races at Las Vegas this weekend, everybody.